The small human ship moved slowly through the thick green clouds of Alaris Prime. Captain Marcus Hale sat in the pilot seat, his hands steady, his heart not so much. He had traveled across half the galaxy alone, carrying no weapons, no army, and no plan except one simple wish: to bring peace between humans and the Illyrians. It was the first official contact between both races in over 200 years. Some said the Illyrians were cold and proud. Others said they were wise and gentle. Marcus didn't know what to believe. All he knew was that his people needed hope, and he was the one chosen to carry it. He looked down at the small wooden box sitting beside him. It was old, carved by hand, its edges smoothed by time. Inside it lay a single wooden feather. It had belonged to his grandmother, who used to tell him stories about the old Earth days when humans believed that every feather carried a wish for peace. She said that giving one meant you trusted someone with your heart. Marcus smiled softly at the memory. It wasn't a political gift. It wasn't expensive. But it was honest. And in his heart he believed honesty could travel further than gold. When his ship landed on the surface, the air shimmered with soft light. The ground was covered in green crystal dust that glowed faintly under his boots. Tall figures in silver robes waited for him at a distance. Their faces were calm, their movements graceful, almost like wind through water. Illyrians. They didn't speak, only bowed slightly before leading him toward a tall tower of glass that reached up into the clouds. As he walked behind them, Marcus could feel dozens of unseen eyes watching him. He knew this was no small meeting. The Queen herself had called for him. Inside the great hall, everything shone as if made of light. Walls glimmered like stars, and the floor reflected his every step. Hundreds of Illyrians stood in silence, their silver eyes fixed on him. No one smiled. No one frowned. It was like standing inside a dream made of glass and music. In the center, upon a throne that seemed to grow from the floor itself, sat the Queen of Alaris Prime. Her skin was pale silver, her hair fell like streams of light, and her eyes held colors that changed every second: blue, violet, gold, and white. She didn't move when he entered, but her presence filled the air like soft thunder. Marcus stopped a few feet away, unsure if he should speak first. The translator orb beside him floated quietly, glowing faintly. Finally, he bowed deeply, as he had practiced many times. "Your Majesty," he said in a calm voice, "I come from Earth with greetings and hope. We wish to build peace and friendship between our worlds." His words echoed softly in the hall, and for a long moment there was only silence. Then the Queen raised her hand, and the air itself seemed to still. When she spoke, her voice was soft yet powerful, like wind through mountains. "Human," she said, "your kind once reached for the stars with fire. Why do you come now after so long with only words?" Marcus hesitated. He knew she was testing him. "Because," he said quietly, "words are what remain when the fire fades, and sometimes words can light a different kind of flame." The Illyrians around him exchanged faint looks, as if they didn't understand or perhaps didn't believe him, but the Queen's eyes stayed on him. She studied him like a puzzle she had waited too long to solve. Then Marcus slowly opened the small wooden box. Inside lay the simple feather, worn and brown, glowing faintly under the crystal light. He stepped forward and placed it gently on the steps leading up to her throne. "This is my gift," he said. "It's from my grandmother. On Earth, we give feathers to those who help us fly higher. It's all I have, but it's given with truth." The Queen didn't move at first. Around her, whispers filled the hall. Some Illyrians looked confused. Others seemed almost insulted. To them, gifts were made of light, power, and technology. A piece of wood meant nothing. But Marcus stood quietly, his eyes honest and unshaken. Slowly, the Queen leaned forward. Her long silver fingers reached toward the feather. When she touched it, a strange light flashed across her eyes, something like surprise, fear, and wonder all at once. Her hand trembled. She froze completely, staring at the small carving as though it had spoken her name. The hall went silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. The Queen whispered softly, her voice breaking the stillness. "Where did you learn this symbol?" Marcus blinked in confusion. "It's just a feather," he said. "It means hope and trust." The Queen stood from her throne, and for the first time emotion crossed her perfect face. "No," she said in a tone that made the whole room tremble slightly. "This is not just a feather. This is the mark of the first harmony." Marcus didn't understand. The Illyrians around him lowered the The Queen looked down at him again. Her silver eyes seemed to search inside him, as if she wanted to see not only his face but his memories too. "Human," she said softly. "You bring an old sign. We thought it lost in time." Her voice was calm, but her tone carried a weight that made every word feel sacred. Marcus didn't know what she meant. "This feather," she continued, raising it gently, "was a mark of unity between our kind and another species long before the stars divided us. We called them the Children of Warmth. They brought us kindness before they vanished into silence." Marcus frowned slightly. "Children of Warmth?" he asked. "I have never heard of them." The Queen stepped down from her throne, and the sound of her steps echoed across the shining floor. Her guards moved aside in silence. She stopped in front of Marcus. Even though she was taller and glowing faintly, her face no longer looked distant or royal. It looked curious, almost gentle. "Perhaps," she said, "your people are what remains of them." Her words sent a shiver through him. Could humans really be connected to a race the Illyrians thought was gone? The Queen turned toward her court and spoke in her own language. The translator orb beside Marcus hummed, repeating her words in English. "Prepare the Hall of Memory. The sign has returned." The crowd murmured in surprise, but no one disobeyed. They bowed deeply and started to move out of the hall. Marcus stood alone as the Queen motioned for him to follow. They walked through long corridors filled with soft, glowing walls that pulsed like living veins of light. The air smelled faintly of flowers and rain, though there was no sky above. As they walked, Marcus noticed carvings on the walls, images of tall figures with feathers in their hands. Some looked almost human. The Queen stopped beside one carving and placed her hand upon it. "This was made before my ancestors were born," she said quietly. "It tells of the ones who came from the third sun, who taught us how to listen to the wind and speak through hearts, not weapons." Marcus listened in silence. Every word she spoke felt like a piece of a story long forgotten. "And you believe we are them?" he asked carefully. The Queen smiled faintly, her eyes soft. "I believe you are their echo, and echoes often bring truth when voices fade." They reached a large chamber shaped like a dome. At its center stood a circle of floating orbs that glowed with golden light. "These," the Queen explained, "are memory orbs. They hold the thoughts and images of our ancestors. Only a few can open them." She stepped closer to one, and her hand hovered above it. The orb began to glow brighter, showing moving shapes, images of beings who looked human, smiling and working beside Illyrians. They built gardens, shared songs, and gifted each other feathers carved from wood. The scene was so real that Marcus felt like he could step inside it. The Queen turned to him slowly. "Do you see now?" she asked softly. "You bring back what we lost." Marcus nodded slowly, feeling both wonder and sadness. "We forgot too," he said. "On Earth, we stopped believing in kindness for a while. Maybe that's why we wandered so far." The Queen looked at him for a long moment. "Then perhaps your journey here was not chance," she said. "Perhaps the stars remembered what you forgot." They stood there in silence as the memory orb faded. The Queen handed the wooden feather back to Marcus. "Keep it," she said. "It has traveled far enough. Now it must return home with truth." He took it carefully, his fingers brushing against hers. For a brief moment he saw something in her eyes, something human, something warm. He couldn't explain it, but he felt it deep inside, like a connection that had always been there waiting to wake up. Before leaving the chamber, Marcus asked quietly, "What happens now?" The Queen walked past him toward the glowing doorway. "Now," she said, "we remember together. The Illyrians will listen to your story. The Council will see what you carry. And perhaps, Captain Hale, your people and mine will share when an Illyrian guard came to escort him to the Hall of Voices." Marcus followed quietly. The corridors were alive with glowing vines and small creatures that floated through the air like jellyfish made of light. The city was a mix of nature and energy, of silence and beauty. Every step made him realize how different the Illyrians were, yet how familiar their world felt, as if his heart recognized it. As he entered the Hall of Voices, the Queen was already waiting. Her robe shimmered with soft gold this time, and her expression was calm but serious. Around her stood members of the Illyrian Council, tall figures with crystal-like crowns. Their eyes studied Marcus as if weighing his very soul. In the middle of the room stood the wooden feather he had given, placed carefully on a glowing stand. Above it floated a beam of blue light that pulsed gently. The Queen gestured for Marcus to come closer. "Captain Hale," she said softly. Last night I studied your symbol in our ancient records. It is the mark of the first harmony. The ones we called the children of warmth came from beyond the third sun, teaching peace through gifts of art and wood. When wars began, they vanished, leaving behind their last message. When the feather returns, the stars will sing again. Marcus listened quietly. The hall was filled with soft murmurs from the council members. The queen continued, "We believed it was only legend, a story told to children. But your feather, your gift, is carved in the same pattern as the ones found in our oldest ruins. It means your people are the lost kin of those who once brought us light." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "So," he said slowly, "humans and Illyrians were friends once?" The queen nodded. "More than friends. We were one in purpose. We shared dreams, music, and hope. But fear separated us. You turned to metal and flame. We turned to silence. And the stars forgot the sound of kindness." Her words hit him deeply. For the first time, Marcus understood the meaning of his journey. It wasn't only about peace between species. It was about rediscovering who they once were before pride divided them. He looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of the Illyrians who watched him with quiet curiosity. "Maybe," he said gently, "the stars didn't forget. Maybe they were waiting for someone to listen again." The queen's eyes softened, and for a moment the hall grew warmer, filled with a faint golden glow. "Perhaps you are right," she whispered. Then she turned toward her council. "Let it be known," she declared, "that the human captain Marcus Hale is now keeper of the feather. He will walk among us as a bridge between what was and what can be." The council bowed their heads. Marcus stood still, hardly believing what he heard. Keeper of the feather. It sounded more like a legend than a title. But the look in the queen's eyes told him she meant every word. Later that day, the queen led Marcus to a wide balcony overlooking the floating city. The wind carried songs, soft, wordless tunes sung by invisible voices. "Our world sings when it remembers joy," the queen said. "Today it sings again." Marcus leaned against the rail, watching the Illyrians below planting new trees and raising banners marked with a feather symbol. It spread quickly from one spire to another like light finding its way back into the dark. He turned toward her. "Why did you freeze yesterday when you saw the feather?" he asked quietly. The queen looked out at the horizon, her expression distant. "When I was young," she said, "I had a vision of this same feather. My elders called it a dream of false hope. But now I know it was memory. Our minds are linked to our ancestors. Perhaps I saw you long before you were born." Marcus smiled faintly. "Maybe our worlds were always meant to meet again." The queen nodded slowly. "Perhaps," she said, "peace was only sleeping." As the two stood in silence, the twin moons rose over the horizon, casting a silver glow over the balcony. The queen turned to Marcus once more. "You brought more than a gift," she said softly. "You brought a reminder that simple hands can rebuild what empires forgot." Marcus didn't know what to say. For a long moment, he simply looked at the feather lying in his hand, glowing faintly under the moonlight. It wasn't just wood anymore. It had become a bridge between Earth and Alaris, between two lost families of the stars. That night, as he rested again in his chamber, he thought of home, of his grandmother's voice, of her stories about peace and feathers, of her saying, "One day, someone will listen." He smiled to himself. Maybe she had been right. Maybe her story was never just a story. Somewhere far above, beyond the clouds of Alaris Prime, the stars seemed brighter, almost alive. Marcus whispered to the sky, "We remembered." And for the first time in centuries, the stars seemed to whisper back. The following day began with a new kind of light over Alaris Prime. The sky looked clearer, almost as if the world itself had taken a deep breath after a long silence. Marcus stood on the balcony of his guest chamber, watching the sunrise spill gold and silver across the horizon. The sound of soft bells rang in the distance. He didn't know what they meant, but they felt peaceful. Below him, the Illyrian city shimmered. Bridges of light connected towers that seemed to grow from the ground like crystal trees. The people moved gracefully, their robes fluttering like wings in the wind. Everywhere he looked, the feather symbol had begun to appear, on doors, on gardens, even on children's tunics. It was spreading quietly like hope being reborn. A soft chime at the door drew his attention. It was the queen's attendant, a young Illyrian with pale green eyes. "The Queen asks for your presence in the Star Gardens," she said politely. Marcus nodded and followed her through winding corridors that glowed beneath their feet. The air inside the palace smelled faintly of flowers and rain again, though Marcus still didn't understand where it came from. Everything in this world felt alive, softly breathing, quietly watching. When they arrived at the Star Gardens, Marcus stopped in awe. The garden wasn't made of trees and soil, but of floating orbs that shimmered like stars. Each orb pulsed with a different color: blue, gold, violet, and soft white. Between them flowed gentle streams of light that looked like water but made no sound. The Queen stood among them, her robe silver as moonlight, her hands folded in front of her. When she turned to see him, her expression was calm but warm. "Welcome, Keeper of the Feather," she said softly. "This is where we keep our memories." Marcus stepped closer, his eyes wide. "They're beautiful," he whispered. The Queen smiled faintly. "These are not decorations. Each one holds a memory of an Illyrian life. Our joy, sorrow, laughter, and learning. They are the hearts of those who came before us." She touched one of the glowing orbs, and it shimmered brighter. Inside it, Marcus could see shapes moving, figures walking under twin moons, children playing, and Illyrians singing. It was like watching time come alive. "These are your ancestors?" he asked softly. "Yes," she said. "And perhaps yours too." Marcus frowned slightly. "Mine?" The Queen nodded, her eyes glowing softly. "You asked before about the Children of Warmth. They came here long ago, teaching us to build harmony between life and the stars. When they left, they promised to return through a sign, the wooden feather you brought. That sign was not just a story. It was a memory passed through generations waiting to awaken." Marcus looked down at the wooden feather in his hand, now worn and faintly glowing. "My grandmother said it was a gift of trust," he said quietly. "She never knew it meant something this big." The Queen's voice softened. "Sometimes truth hides in small hands, waiting for a heart brave enough to offer it." She reached for another orb, and when she touched it, it glowed brighter. Marcus saw a vision appear inside it, beings that looked human but were taller, dressed in simple clothes, working beside Illyrians. They were laughing, building, sharing songs. The Queen's voice trembled. "This was the first harmony. This is what we lost." The image faded slowly, leaving a soft light behind. Marcus stood silent for a long moment. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "And sad." The Queen nodded. "It was meant to remind us that unity is stronger than distance. But when the wars came, fear broke it apart." She turned to look at him. "You came from the world they called the Third Sun. You brought their mark. That means the circle can begin again." Her words carried a quiet power, one that made Marcus feel both small and honored. "So this," he said, lifting the feather, "is more than peace between two worlds. It's the return of something ancient." The Queen's eyes softened. "It is the return of understanding." For a long moment they stood side by side, surrounded by the glowing memories. The Queen looked at the orbs as if she were seeing them with new eyes. "When I touched your gift," she said gently, "I felt something I hadn't felt since I was a child. Warmth. Real warmth. It was like sunlight inside my heart. For centuries we thought emotions made us weak, but maybe they make us whole." Marcus smiled faintly. "That's something humans forget too," he said. "We build machines, cities, and ships, but we forget to feel." The Queen looked at him thoughtfully. "Then perhaps both our worlds forgot the same lesson." As they walked through the garden, Marcus noticed some of the memory orbs slowly drifting closer, their light touching him gently, as if welcoming him. The Queen noticed too. "They recognize you," she said quietly. "They remember your kind." Marcus felt a strange comfort, like invisible hands patting his shoulder. "Then maybe they know we're home," he said softly. The Queen stopped near a large crystal flower at the center of the garden. Its petals glowed in patterns of blue and gold. She placed her hand over it and it opened slowly, revealing a small pool of light. "This," she said, "is the heart of Alaris. It connects all memories. It will show us truth if you wish to see it." Marcus hesitated but nodded. Together they leaned over the pool. The light shimmered and began to form images. Earth, its blue oceans and green lands. Then Alaris glowing with crystal towers. Slowly, the two worlds drew closer in the reflection until their lights touched. Marcus could feel something deep in his chest, like a heartbeat that wasn't his own. "What does it mean?" he asked. The Queen looked at him softly. "It means the past has found its way home." For a moment, neither spoke. The garden around them seemed to hum with gentle sound. Marcus looked at the queen, her silver hair glowing under the light of the floating orbs. "Your Majesty," he said quietly. Maybe the first harmony never really ended. Maybe it was waiting for someone to remember. She smiled faintly. "Then let us remember together. Captain Hale." And as they stood there in the garden of living memories surrounded by light and peace, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years. A quiet certainty that humanity was not alone. And that kindness once shared never truly disappears. The day after the visit to the Star Gardens, Alaris Prime was filled with quiet excitement. The Queen had made an announcement that spread through every crystal tower and light-filled street. The words reached every Illyrian. "The first harmony has awakened. The Keeper of the Feather walks among us." Some Illyrians were curious, some doubtful, but most felt a soft warmth they hadn't known for centuries. The air seemed lighter, and even the glowing trees sang a little louder that morning. Marcus walked through the open streets, guided by a young Illyrian named Lyra, who had been assigned to assist him. The city was alive with movement. Children with bright eyes ran past him, holding small wooden feathers carved by their parents. Each child waved them proudly. "They're copying you," Lyra said with a smile. Marcus couldn't help but laugh softly. "Then I hope they understand what it means." Lyra nodded. "They do. It means peace." As they walked farther, Marcus noticed murals being painted on the walls, scenes of humans and Illyrians together, exchanging gifts, sharing stars. He stopped to watch one artist at work. "We were told stories about your kind," the artist said, dipping his brush into glowing paint. "But stories fade. Now the Queen says they were real. You remind us that memory can live again." Marcus smiled gently. "Maybe we're all just remembering who we used to be." Later that afternoon, the Queen called Marcus to the grand balcony. It was high above the city, overlooking the silver plains that stretched to the horizon. The twin suns were beginning to set, painting the sky in rose and gold. The Queen stood beside the crystal railing, her robe fluttering softly in the breeze. When Marcus arrived, she turned and gave him a calm smile. "You've seen what your gift has done," she said quietly. "Our people are talking again, not in fear but in wonder." Marcus joined her at the railing. "It's not just my gift," he said. "It's what they already carried inside. Sometimes it just takes one small thing to remind people to hope again." The Queen looked at him thoughtfully. "You speak like one of the old teachers," she said. "Maybe you have been one all along." They stood in silence for a while, watching ships of light move slowly across the sky. The Queen's voice broke the quiet. "When I was a child, I was taught that peace was weakness," she said. "That to rule meant never showing heart. But when I touched your feather, I felt something I had forgotten. Trust. It frightened me at first. Then I realized it was not weakness. It was strength of another kind." Marcus nodded slowly. "My grandmother used to say the same thing. That real strength isn't in what we can destroy, but in what we can heal." The Queen looked down at the glowing city below them. "Maybe our worlds are not so different," she said softly. "We both lost something precious. You lost your way among the stars, and we lost our hearts to silence. Perhaps this meeting is not chance, but a promise kept." Marcus turned toward her. "Then let's make sure it's not broken again." The Queen smiled, her silver eyes reflecting the twin suns. "That is why I've called for something new," she said. "Tomorrow we open the gates of memory to your people. We will send a message to Earth, inviting your leaders to stand with us. You will be the one to deliver it." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Me?" he asked. "You trust me with that?" The Queen nodded slowly. "You brought us truth when no one else dared. You speak with honesty, not pride. That is what the universe needs most right now." Marcus felt a mix of pride and fear. He wasn't a diplomat or a famous hero, just a pilot with an old wooden box. But maybe that was enough. "I'll do my best," he said quietly. The Queen placed a small silver crystal in his hand. "This will carry our message," she said. "It will sing through the void until Earth hears. Tell them that Alaris remembers." Night fell slowly over the city. Tiny lights floated into the sky like lanterns, each carrying a carved feather tied beneath. It was a new Illyrian tradition, the song of return. People whispered blessings as they released the lights, watching them rise higher and higher. Marcus stood beside the Queen as they watched the glowing sky. "They're beautiful," he said softly. "They're sending their hopes to the stars." The Queen nodded. "It's our way of thanking you. The Keeper of the Feather has given us our voice again." For a moment they stood in silence, the stars above reflecting in the crystal towers around them. Marcus felt the gentle breeze and the hum of a living city reborn. He thought about Earth, about crowded streets, noise, and doubt. He wondered how people there would react when they saw this message, this light from a world of grace and peace. Maybe, he said quietly. This time we'll listen. The Queen looked at him, her eyes warm. And maybe, she replied, this time we will not let silence return. When Marcus returned to his chamber that night, he looked at the silver crystal resting in his hand. It glowed softly, almost breathing. He placed it beside the wooden feather, and the two lights blended together, silver and gold, alien and human. For the first time, they seemed to belong to each other. He smiled faintly. We're not so different, he whispered. Outside, the twin moons rose over Alaris Prime, shining upon a world that had begun to remember its lost song. And in one quiet room high above the city, a human and a simple gift had become the bridge between two species, proving that even across light years, a single act of kindness could change the stars forever. The next day arrived with a feeling of calm and promise. The city of Alaris Prime glowed brighter than before. Its towers of crystal caught the sunlight and scattered it across the skies like rivers of light. Every Illyrian seemed to walk with a lighter heart. The news of the Queen's decision had reached every corner of the world. For the first time in centuries, their people were preparing to send a message beyond the stars, a message not of power, but of peace. Marcus woke early and stood at the window of his chamber. The horizon shimmered with two suns rising together, painting the sky in gold and soft pink. He held the silver crystal in his hand. Inside it, he could see faint shapes, waves of energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. It carried the Queen's message, the one he would deliver to Earth. The thought filled him with both pride and nervousness. He was just one man, a simple pilot, but now the hopes of two civilizations rested in his hands. When he stepped outside, the Queen's guards were waiting to escort him to the Sky Gate, the great portal that connected Alaris Prime to the outer systems. Along the way, Marcus saw Illyrians standing by the streets, bowing slightly as he passed. They held their carved feathers high, their soft glowing tips floating gently in the air. It was their way of blessing his journey. He could feel the emotion behind their silent respect, and it warmed his heart. At the Sky Gate, the Queen stood waiting in her robe of white and silver. The air around her shimmered faintly, as if the light itself bowed to her presence. Marcus approached and bowed his head. Your Majesty, he said softly. She smiled kindly. Captain Hale, she replied, today you do not carry just our message. You carry our trust. He looked up at the gate behind her, a ring of energy suspended between two massive crystal towers. It pulsed slowly, a swirl of blue and silver light spinning in its center. Is it safe? Marcus asked with a half smile. The Queen chuckled softly, a rare sound that made her seem almost human. It is safe, she said, though no journey between hearts is ever without risk. They walked together to a platform near the gate. Around them, members of the Illyrian Council stood in silence. Lyra, the young attendant, held a small bundle wrapped in soft cloth. She handed it to Marcus. When he unwrapped it, he found another wooden feather inside, this one freshly carved by Illyrian hands. It glowed faintly in shades of blue. Our children made this, Lyra said gently. They said it must travel with you so your world will know we remember. Marcus smiled, his throat tightening with emotion. I'll keep it safe, he promised. The Queen stepped closer, her silver eyes reflecting the swirling gate. When you reach your people, she said softly, tell them that we do not seek power or rule. We seek harmony, the kind that once made both our races great. Marcus nodded slowly. I will, he said. And I'll tell them it began with a gift from one world to another. The Queen raised her hand, touching the small wooden feather still hanging around his neck from his grandmother's box. It beggy. And with kindness, she said, never forget that. As the wind from the Sky Gate grew stronger, the energy around them hummed like a great living song. The Queen's voice rose above the sound. Let this day be remembered as the day silence ended. Let the keeper of the feather bring back the light that was lost. Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion. He looked at the Queen, and for a moment neither spoke. There was understanding in her eyes and something more, respect, even affection. He bowed deeply. Thank you, he said quietly, for believing in me. The queen's voice softened. "Thank you for reminding me to believe again." He stepped onto the platform, the silver crystal glowing in his hand. The energy from the gate wrapped around him like wind and light mixed together. As he turned one last time, he saw the queen standing tall, her robe flowing, her silver hair glowing against the sky. The Illyrians raised their carved feathers high, their song echoing softly through the air. Then the light grew brighter, and the world of Alaris faded. When Marcus opened his eyes, he was standing inside his ship. The control panels flickered and the stars stretched endlessly outside the window. The feathers still glowed beside the crystal. Everything looked the same, yet he felt different, stronger, lighter, as if part of Alaris had traveled with him. He checked his coordinates. Earth was several days away. He activated the communication system and placed the crystal inside the transmitter. The lights of the console turned silver as the Queen's message began to broadcast through space. Her voice filled the cabin, calm and melodic, speaking in both Illyrian and human translation. "This is the Queen of Alaris Prime. We reach across the stars not as rulers, but as friends. We have remembered the harmony that once joined us. The gift has returned, and with it our hope. Let our world speak again, not through fear, but through peace." As her voice echoed through the cabin, Marcus felt a lump in his throat. He imagined the people of Earth hearing it, the scientists, the leaders, the dreamers, the children looking up at the night sky. He hoped they would listen, really listen, the way he had listened when he first heard her voice. He sat back in his seat watching the stars slide by. Outside, a faint glow trailed behind his ship, a mix of human steel and Illyrian light. For the first time, the distance between the two worlds didn't feel endless. It felt like a bridge. As he closed his eyes, Marcus whispered to himself, "We found our way home." And far away on Alaris Prime, under the twin suns, the Queen stood on her balcony, watching the night sky. When she saw the streak of light leaving her world, she placed her hand over her heart and whispered into the wind, "Go well, Keeper of the Feather. The stars will remember." The journey back to Earth felt longer than the one that had taken Marcus to Alaris Prime. The stars outside his ship drifted past slowly, each one glowing softly like an old memory. He often sat quietly, holding the silver crystal and the two feathers, one from his grandmother and one made by Illyrian children. Both rested side by side, shining with gentle light. He kept thinking about the Queen, about her calm voice and her words. "When you return, carry kindness with you." Those words stayed in his heart, giving him strength. Days passed as his ship moved through the endless dark. Marcus sent out the Illyrian message again and again, letting the Queen's voice travel ahead of him through space. He didn't know if Earth had heard yet, but deep down he believed they had. Hope, once released, always finds a listener. When Earth finally appeared on the screen, blue and green and alive, Marcus felt a mix of pride and peace. He had left this world as a messenger and was returning as something more, a bridge between two civilizations. As his ship entered the atmosphere, clouds brushed against the windows and the soft hum of engines filled the air. He landed quietly in the central base of the Global Alliance where a group of officers and scientists were waiting. The commander, an older woman named Dr. Ilara Finch, stepped forward first. "Captain Hale," she said, her voice steady but filled with curiosity, "we received your transmissions. The world has been listening, is it true? Did you really make contact?" Marcus smiled faintly and reached into his pocket. He held up the small wooden feather. "Yes," he said. "And they remember us." The crowd fell silent. For a moment, no one spoke. Dr. Finch looked at the feather as if it were something holy. "You brought peace," she whispered. Marcus shook his head gently. "No," he said. "I just carried it. Peace was already waiting for us, it was just hidden." Later, Marcus was asked to speak to the world. The message from Alaris Prime had spread quickly. People everywhere had heard the Queen's words and seen her glowing image projected across the skies. Many cried. Many felt something they hadn't felt in generations, hope. Now it was Marcus's turn to speak, standing before cameras that reached every corner of Earth. He took a deep breath and looked straight ahead. "People of Earth," he began in simple words, "I met a queen who lives among the stars. Her world shines with light, not war. When I arrived, I brought her a small gift, a wooden feather carved by my grandmother. I didn't know it meant anything more than kindness. But to her it was a sign from a forgotten time, a memory of friendship between our worlds. She told me that long ago our ancestors shared peace. Then we forgot, but now we remember again. He paused, letting his words sink in. The Queen of Alaris sends us her message. She doesn't ask for control or power. She asks for understanding. She believes that both our kinds were meant to lift each other higher. I saw her people. I saw their hearts. And I saw that they are not so different from us. They just waited for someone to say, "We still believe." Across the world, people listened in silence. Families watched together. Children pointed to the glowing feather on his table, and leaders stood in quiet thought. Marcus continued, his voice calm but full of feeling. We have built cities, ships, and machines, but we forgot how to listen. The Illyrians taught me that kindness travels further than technology. So let's listen now. To them, to each other, to the quiet voice that says peace is possible. When he finished, the room filled with a soft, stunned silence. Then slowly applause began. It grew louder until it filled the entire hall. Dr. Finch stepped forward, tears in her eyes. You've changed history, Captain, she said softly. Marcus shook his head again. I didn't change history, he replied. I just remembered it. In the following days, Earth began to change. Messages of friendship were sent back to Alaris Prime. Scientists and leaders worked together to open the first shared space bridge. Children everywhere began carving feathers, wooden, metal, glass, placing them in windows as signs of unity. Across cities, people spoke not of fear but of hope. The feather had become a symbol of light between worlds. One evening, Marcus stood alone on a high hill overlooking the ocean. The sun was setting, turning the waves gold. In his hand he held the glowing Illyrian feather. He touched it gently, and for a moment it shimmered brighter. A faint voice, soft and musical, echoed in his mind. It was the Queen. The stars remember you, keeper of the feather, her voice said. And they thank you. Marcus smiled, looking up at the first star appearing in the sky. No, he whispered softly. Thank you. He placed the two feathers together inside the wooden box and set it beside him on the grass. The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of the sea and the sound of waves. He felt at peace, knowing that both worlds were no longer alone. Above him, a silver light streaked across the sky. It wasn't a shooting star. It was an Illyrian ship entering Earth's orbit, shining like a promise kept. People all over the world looked up and saw it too. They cheered, cried, and smiled. The message had worked. The stars had answered. Marcus stood quietly, watching the light fade into the distance. He thought of his grandmother, of her soft hands and her words, "One day someone will listen." He smiled and whispered to the sky, "We listened, Grandma." We finally did. The wind rustled through the grass, carrying the sound of the sea and the faint hum of the stars above. And as night fell over Earth for the first time in centuries, two worlds looked at each other not as strangers, but as family, united by a single, simple gift that had once seemed too small to matter. The feather had done what no weapon or treaty ever could. It had made the universe remember kindness again.